Hello students, I am Alka and I welcome you all to my channel Study with Alka. Dear students, today in this video I am going to discuss the topic growth of folklore studies in India. We're going to talk about folklore studies particularly in India and Indian subcontinent. My dear students, I have already uploaded a video regarding folk literature in general and study of folklore in various other parts of the world. So anyone who is interested in gaining detailed discussion of this very topic, folk literature in general, you can check out the video on my YouTube channel. Now, in this video, we are particularly going to talk about folklore studies in India and Indian subcontinent. My dear students, before moving on further, let's have a quick recap of folklore. Dear students, folklore is a term that was coined by William John Thoms in 1846. William John Thoms is the first person who coined the term folklore. Now, this folklore is a term that is a word that consists of two different terms, that is folk and lore. Here, folk means regional people and lore means stories. So, basically, folklore mean stories that belong to a particular region and is told by the people of a particular region. Oral and written narratives told by a particular population of a region. So, folklore basically means oral and written narratives or stories or tales or any kind of ancient historical data told by a particular population of a region. Basically, they are traditional and cultural treasures of a population passed down from one generation to the next through stories, songs, legends, dance, etc. So, dear students, don't get confused between the two terms folk literature and folklore. My dear students, folklore is a term that is used synonymically for folk literature. Folklore is also known as folk literature and folk literature can be termed as folklore. Now, the study of folk literature is known as folkloristics. So, folkloristics or study of folk literature in a single term means study of folk literature. If termed by a single word, it will be called as folkloristics. Now, let's get on to the main topic, that is Indian folklore. What is Indian folklore? The folklore of India comprises the folklore of the nation of India and the Indian subcontinent. So, the folk literature of India basically comprises the folk literature of the nation India, that is our country, and the Indian subcontinents, which include countries like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. The subcontinent of India contains such a diversity of ethnic, linguistic, and religious groups that it is difficult to generalize widely about its folklore. Now, we know that India is a country with unity in diversity. It's a country with diverse culture, diverse language, diverse dance forms. Similarly, the other subcontinents of India also is full of rich ethnic, linguistic, and religious diversity, and that is why it becomes very difficult to generalize widely about its folklore, and that is why folklore study is something which is very complex yet very important. Now, because of its vast and bewildering racial and linguistic cultural heritage, India enjoys a special place in the international folklore scholarship. Now, when we talk about folklore studies on international level, India is a country that occupies a very special place. Why is that? because of its vast and bewildering racial and linguistic cultural heritage. India is a country that's full of diverse language, diverse culture, diverse races, and diverse dance forms. So the history of India is a box full of materials that can be a part of folk literature on international level. For example, the marvelous Indic tale has contributed greatly in shaping the theoretical growth of Indian folkloristics. The marvelous Indic tales has contributed greatly in shaping the theoretical growth of Indian folkloristics. So one of the things that has contributed highly, that is the reason, that becomes the reason for the theoretical growth of Indian folkloristics or Indian folklore studies, is the marvelous Indic tales. Max Muller, who is known for writing Indian history on his own experience and studies, his work on Indian myths and Theodore Benfey's translation of the famous Panchtantra gave rise to the theory of Indian origin of the fairy tale. So Max Muller is someone who is known for working a lot on things related to Indian history and Indian myths. So his work on Indian mythology and Indian history, as well as Theodore Benfey's translation of the famous Panchtantra. Panchtantra, one of the very famous um, legend or tale of Indian history, gave rise to the theory of Indian origin of fairy tales. So the stories related to fairy tale, or the very concept of fairy tale, is something that is attributed to Indian origin. It is said that the theory of fairy tale first got its origin in India, and so what is the reason? Was the translation of Panchtantra. Translation of Panchtantra gave the theory of Indian origin. So Panchtantra became the reason, became the source of study for fairy tales. India also has the fortune of retaining oldest written oral traditions in the world. So oral tradition or oral narrative is something that is passed down, that has been passed down from generation to generation by the word of mouth. But later on, when people of India, or when the folklorists of India realized the importance of folk material, they started translating these oral narratives, and that is why India has the fortune of retaining, of having oldest written oral traditions in the world. The Rig Veda, Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Puranas and Upanishads, rightly called as the encyclopedia of India, Indian religion and mythology, are some of the best examples. So some of the best examples that become a very source of the study of Indian religion and mythology and the Indian culture are the Rig Veda, the work of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the stories of Puranas and Upanishads. Now, though India has a history of 2 centuries of collection of folklore, literature, modern scientific study, although I have already said that India is a storehouse of folklore material, and that is why India occupies a very special place. India enjoys a very special place on international level, international studies of folk literature. But yet, the modern scientific study of folk literature in India began only after the arrival of the British. So, after the arrival of British Empire in India, the modern scientific study of folk literature in India actually began. Before that, folklore study was a part was not taken that seriously. It was just something which was being passed down by the word of mouth. Now, dear students, Jawaharlal Nehru, one of the very foremost and the greatest folklorist of India. Folklorist is someone who studies folk literature, who is involved in the field of folk literature studies. So, Jawaharlal Nehru, one of the greatest folklorists of India, categorized the growth of Indian folkloristics into three main eras. So, as I have already told, that folk literature of India is something which is very complex and very yet very important. It has become important. It had became important for the ancient folklorists of India to categorize its growth into three main eras, and that is why, so that their studies, their research can become a little bit easier. And so Jawaharlal Nehru, one of the greatest folklorists of India, categorized the growth of Indian folkloristics into three main eras: the missionary period, the nationalistic period, and the academic period. Now, dear students, this is it for today's video. In the next part of this video, I'm going to talk about the missionary period specifically, and then I'll put the next video on nationalistic period and further on the academic period. Hope you like this video and it has helped you a bit in your studies. Thank you, and please don't forget to like and subscribe my channel. Share with someone who actually need this. Thank you.